This event is proudly sponsored by PiggyVest, the better way to save and invest.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending on wherever you're joining from. It's a beautiful afternoon from the city of Lagos, Nigeria, Africa. And it's my pride, privilege, and pleasure to be with you this afternoon. My name is Tosin Imogeme. You could call me TI for short. And I will be your master of ceremonies, otherwise known as the MC. I'll be the one anchoring this remarkable event. Now, I'm just going to be your captain of the ship, but I'm just the mere captain. I'm not necessarily a stakeholder. We have stakeholders in the house. And of course, some of you have joined already. And I'm just going to be introducing and anchoring this session seamlessly, but I just want to take out this time to welcome you formally, to this wonderful, remarkable, scintillating event. I feel really excited. I feel really intrigued because I know I'm going to learn a lot of things from our seasoned speakers from the various and different disciplines. So welcome once again, and the show has just started. Now, it was Nelson Mandela who said, education is the most powerful tool with which we can change the world. Alvin Toffler said, the illiterates of the 21st century are not necessarily those who cannot read or write, but those who cannot learn, relearn, and unlearn. And that's the essence of this event. I'm welcoming you to the second Africa's Dyslexia's dialogue. And this is the second of its kind. And this is hosted by Dyslexia's Nigeria, a non-profit organization dedicated to, of course, empowering people on the subject of dyslexia and everything that has to do with it. And that's why we're having this event, because we need to keep creating awareness. We need to keep educating people. We need to keep reminding ourselves, because we keep having discoveries every day, every now and then. And we have seasoned speakers, we have reputable individuals who have lived a life of dedication to great work, great and zealous work. And they will be sharing some of their discoveries, some of their work with us in this section. But as we move on, I'll be welcoming the convener of this event. Like I said previously, I'm just the master of ceremonies, but the convener, the founder, the brain behind this event is none other than Dr. Andre Tikolo. And I'll be just reading a short bio. Please just spare me a moment. As some of you know, Dr. Tikolo is no stranger. She's someone who, of course, does not need an introduction, but to fulfill all righteousness, let me just read a bio. Now, just a moment, please. All right, thank you both. Thank you so much for your patience. Now, Dr. Andre Tikolo is the managing director of Dyslexia Nigeria. She's a seasoned educationist with over 30 years work experience. That's over 3 decades in education delivery, research, administration, and management. Dr. Tikolo is certified in dyslexia assessment, support, and intervention. She holds a certificate of competence in educational testing, a diploma in dyslexia support, and a certificate in assessment and access arrangement from Middlesex University, UK. She is a board certified cognitive specialist and a member of the British Dyslexia Guild and British Psychological Society. Dr. Tikolo is passionate about helping children with dyslexia achieve their full potential. And like I said earlier, she's the convener of this event. And I met her a few weeks ago, and sincerely, rubbing minds with her has really been transforming, for me. Ladies and gentlemen, my dear panelists and our members of the audience, please let's make welcome the convener of this remarkable event, Dr. Tikolo. Dr. Tikolo, over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very, very much, and awesome to see everyone here today. I am excited about this dialogue today and seeing these wonderful faces. Oh my goodness, I am bursting at the seams. Our respected keynote speaker, Dr. Sally Shewitz, co-founder and managing director of the Yale Dyslexia Center. Our esteemed panelists who have taken time out today to share their knowledge, experience, and passion for dyslexia. Our audience, everyone from around the globe that is here with us today. Welcome to the second Africa Dyslexia Dialogue. I am Dr. Adrienne Tikolo, the Managing Director at Dyslexia Nigeria, and I'm honored, excited, and humbled by this opportunity to welcome you all to the second Africa Dyslexia Dialogue. As you may know, Dyslexia Nigeria was established to educate, convene, and empower stakeholders concerned with dyslexia. Our aim is to create an environment where individuals experiencing dyslexia can thrive. In other words, we exist to ensure that Africans with learning difficulties, specific primarily to reading, writing, and spelling, whose challenges are often unseen and whose incredible strengths are often overlooked, can attain their full potential. When we embarked on the journey of the Africa Dyslexia Dialogue 3 years ago, we started with the hope of sparking a conversation with what would be a handful of people in a small room. And today, one dialogue later, we're privileged to have panelists from around the world, from Africa, from Europe, and from the United States, experts at the forefront of dyslexia research and intervention, and who have made clear pathways for dyslexia. We also have with us a virtual room of many, many, many participants. We have over 800 people that have registered for this event. Thank you all for showing the collective progress that we are making to ensure that life is more meaningful, more equitable, more accessible, and more rewarding for dyslexics in Africa. Thank you for your willingness to have conversations that equip all of us to build an ecosystem of stakeholders who can effectively learn to live, love, and excel with dyslexia, whether it be personally or for family, colleagues, and friends. We know that dyslexia is a learning difference specific to literacy and language processing. We know that it manifests as a difficulty acquiring literacy skills in conventional ways. We also know that it presents dyslexics and the world at large with an incredible strength like creativity, idea, 3D thinking, problem solving, and empathy, skills that add color to an otherwise black and white world. But we don't always know how to identify it and how to support the 280 million Africans who live with dyslexia. Our goal today is to explore what we all can do in simple, practical terms to identify and support individuals with dyslexia at school, and at work. At the end of our discussions, we want you to have learned effective skills and strategies that make sense for a meaningful life with dyslexia. And that will bring us and them personal success within reach. Please listen and engage, not just with your ears, but with your heart. Listen with a willingness to really see the beauty in our differences. Listen, so that you can truly begin to hear the symphony of our neurodiversity in our collective orchestra as a human race. Thank you, everyone, and welcome once again.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tikolo. Thank you so much. Can we just give her a virtual round of applause? Just please, let's just appreciate her, appreciate her, appreciate her. She's the reason why we're here. She's the one who's put this event, put everything together, got seasoned speakers to come, share their wealth of experience. I really do appreciate you, Mom. And I look forward, of course, to learning on this, journey. Now, without further ado, we will be having a keynote address by another seasoned speaker who, of course, has done, countless researches, dedicated her life to, learning and discoveries about dyslexia. We're going to be having two panel sessions, which of course will be spearheaded, will be anchored by moderators. And before then, we'll have a keynote speech by Dr. Sally Shadewitz. And sincerely, it's an honor. When I read her profile, sincerely, I was blown away. This is a woman who has dedicated her life to so much, and I felt intimidated reading her profile. So I'll just read a short one so we wouldn't waste much of our time, because I know we're all busy and we're just taking our time. We spend our time to just be here to share, from our wealth of experience. Now, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Sally Shadewitz is the Audrey G. Ratner Professor in Learning Development at Yale University and the co-founder and co-director of the Yale Center for Dyslexia and Creativity. Dr. Shadewitz, born a physician scientist, carrying out cutting-edge scientific studies to increase our understanding of dyslexia, and as a deeply caring physician, is devoted to ensuring that individuals who are dyslexic, their parents and teachers receive all this wonderful new scientific evidence so that they can act and benefit from it. She's the creator and principal investigator of She is the creator and the principal investigator, and she has had a whole lot of experience, which has, spanned for over 39 years continuously, and has followed up with a random sample of 45 boys and girls from kindergarten entry at age 5 years to mature adulthood, age 45. And like I said, she has so much here that if I begin to read, we may not even leave this place. Dr. Sally is a legend. She's a living legend. And I just want to appreciate her. Ladies and gentlemen, with a virtual round of applause once again, let's welcome Dr. Sally Shadewitz as she, gives us our keynote speech. Dr. Sally, over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. Well, first, I have to begin by saying I am so impressed by what all of you, particularly Dr. Tikolo, have done in Africa and in Nigeria. When I was looking through the materials, I said, oh my gosh, they're ahead of us. They're doing so much. And it shows just what you were pointing to. You have to, if you're going to help people, you have to do it both from your brain and your heart. And it shows that coming together in Nigeria. So what I'm going to speak about today.
Make sure everybody can see.
Can everybody see the slide? Yes. Dyslexia in the 21st century. Science bringing hope to children and adults who are dyslexic. Okay, I wanted to begin by showing you the cover of my book, the second edition, Overcoming Dyslexia. I would lecture very often and people would always say, well, where's the book? So in 2003, I published the first edition of Overcoming Dyslexia. And not too long ago, 2020, I published the second edition, co-written with my son, Dr. Jonathan Shaywitz, who is an extraordinary psychiatrist. And much of what I'm going to be saying is in the book. And as I speak, I will, if I don't forget, mention what pages you may find this information on. I also have up here, I was very fortunate to have this wonderful commentary written on the back cover by none other than Nobel laureate Bob Dylan. So from its origins, dyslexia was first described maybe a little over 100 years ago. And there were descriptions of these bright children, except they couldn't learn to read. And that's the origin of our current perspective of dyslexia as an unexpected difficulty.
Clear your throat.
And that is the 21st century definition of dyslexia. In the United States, Public Law 115-391, which was passed by Congress and signed into law in 2018. You can find it on page 525 in Overcoming Dyslexia. So what the law says is that dyslexia is an unexpected difficulty in reading for an individual who has the intelligence to be a much better reader. And here is some of the data. So here you can see in typical readers, IQ on top, reading with the dashed line below. IQ and reading travel together over time in typical readers. So IQ and reading are linked. Most likely, if you're very smart, you'll be a very good reader as well. Now, on the right in red, I've shown the same thing in dyslexic readers. Here's IQ, intelligence, and here's reading. But look at that. Look at this gap. Because the difficulties in reading are unexpected given that individual's IQ. So in dyslexia, IQ and reading diverge, and this can be found in Overcoming Dyslexia on page 103. And we also published this in the journal Psych Science in 2010. So now, my colleague, who also happens to be my husband, Dr. Bennett Shaywitz, will tell you a little bit about the neural systems in dyslexia.
Thank you. It's a pleasure for me to be here as well. We've learned a great deal about the neural systems in dyslexia in the last 2 or 3 decades because of the emergence of a wonderful technology called functional magnetic resonance imaging. And basically what we're able to do is look at the brain at work. And here is one of the children who participates in a study. She's in a typical MRI imager, but she's looking up through a prism and she's looking at reading tasks that we're presenting on a screen. And what functional MRI allows us to do, there's a difference in magnetic properties of oxygenated hemoglobin and deoxygenated hemoglobin. And so we can see as she's reading which parts of the brain are using more oxygenated hemoglobin. And what we're able to do and we do this off out of the imager, it's post processing. And here is the results of a study in a schematic form. We're looking at the left side of the brain, sorry, and we're seeing the left as the front of the brain, the back, the right is the back of the brain. And what we're seeing in typical readers, non-impaired readers, that as she's reading, three systems are activated. A system in the left side of the front of the brain around an area called Broca's area, and two systems in the back of the brain, one in an area called the parietal temporal region, and another in yellow in this figure called the occipital temporal region, and that's sometimes called the word form area. And that's what we see in typical readers. And we're seeing these in groups of 20 or 30 or even 100 typical readers compared to dyslexic readers. And here in dyslexic readers, we see something very different. And what we see is what's called the neural signature for dyslexia. And that's an inefficient functioning of those systems in the back of the brain. And so you see a system in the left side of the front of the brain activated, but those systems in the left side of the back of the brain are not activated. And what brain imaging has taught us about dyslexia is that, yes, there is a neural signature for dyslexia, and that is an inefficient functioning of those neural systems, those brain systems for skilled fluent reading. And most importantly, what I think brain imaging has allowed us to do is make visible what previously was a hidden disability. Now, back to Sally.
Okay, so as I mentioned, I'm a pediatrician, a behavioral pediatrician, and when parents call in that they're concerned about their child's learning and specifically reading, I'm the one that sees those children. Well, way back in the early 1980s, we were seeing many such children, and I try to look at the literature, and quite honestly, it wasn't very helpful. So Dr. Bennett Shaywitz and I designed a new study. We labeled it the Connecticut Longitudinal Study, and you can read about it on pages 25 to 35. And it's an epidemiologic sample survey, which means it's essentially a random sample of children we invited to enter the study. The key thing was that they were the age of entering kindergarten, 4.5 to 5.5 years in 1983. We were very fortunate. We were able to enroll 445 boys and girls. And this is also a longitudinal cohort study. It's been going on for 39 years, and it's still going strong. In fact, we're currently enrolling the 45-year-olds for the next phase. So it began in kindergarten, and we developed a full range of assessments: cognitive, academic, social, self-concept, family history, you name it. We got information on it every year from kindergarten through grade 12, and then continued less intensively, but every year. And the individuals are now 45 years old. They have been followed for 39 years. So in 2022, we currently follow 363 men and women of the original 445 boys and girls. That's 82%, which is very unusual in a study this long. And we're very, very excited about it, as are many people, because we now have the unique opportunity. You know, when your child begins school or goes to school, you wonder, what can I do? What courses, what activities would be the most helpful in as they mature? Well, we have that now because we have the predictors, and in our adults, we measure the adult outcome. So we can look at different outcomes and see what are the best predictors of specific outcomes. And similarly, we have the outcomes, and we could look at the best predictors, positive and less positive. So this study has taught us a great deal, and much of the data on dyslexia, the current scientific data, has emerged from the Connecticut longitudinal study. We have found that dyslexia is universal. Here I'm talking to you from the United States, the state of Connecticut, to you in Nigeria, and we're talking about the same condition. It's universal. It cuts across racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic boundaries. It is very, very common. 1 out of 5 children. Imagine that. There are 12 million children in the United States who are dyslexic. Every class has children who are struggling readers. And this is the important thing. To be counted, you must first be identified. If you're not identified, you can't be counted. So that's very, very important. I'll get to that in a few minutes. It also affects boys and girls. Both. It used to be thought only boys, but it's not. It's boys and girls. And it doesn't go away. It's persistent. It's lifelong. The reading can improve a little bit, but once you're dyslexic, you're always dyslexic. So, what has science taught us about how we read? And the question is, why does print have meaning? Why, when we look at what's up on the screen now, do we know that these letters make words and the words have meaning? We as humans evolved to speak. Speaking is natural. In contrast, we did not evolve to read. Reading is acquired and has only been with us humans maybe 5,000 years. So what happened, or has to happen, is that the lines and circles of print take on meaning when they're linked to something that already has meaning, and that is the sounds of spoken language, the phonology. And Leonard Bloomfield, I think, captured this relationship very nicely when he stated writing is a way of recording language by visible marks. So it's important to appreciate that words are not whole envelopes of sound, but are comprised of segments which represent sound. So even the small word cat, C-A-T, is comprised of 3 components, k, a, and t. And the reader has to learn how to link these letters to their sounds. And the printed word has the same number and sequence of sounds as the spoken word. So here, let me give you an example. In speaking, what you have to do is access and retrieve the sounds of the word you want to say. For example, if I want to say the word cat, I have to access the k, the t, and the a, put them in the right order, and that will activate the muscles of articulation so you can say cat. Most often, the dyslexic individual knows what he or she wants to say, but it may not be what comes out of his or her mouth because of the difficulties in accessing the appropriate phonemes. Reading is almost the opposite. We start with the intact word, here C-A-T, cat, and what we have to do is transform each letter into its sound, the C into the k, the A into the a, the T into the t, blend those sounds together, and we've identified the word, and you could see this in Overcoming Dyslexia on page 42. And we've also come to understand that the origin of the difficulties in dyslexia is getting to the sounds of spoken language, which in turn leads to a range of symptoms. If you can't access and retrieve the sounds of the words you want to say, that impacts negatively word retrieval. It impacts reading and spelling. And if you've had difficulty learning how to read your native language, imagine what happens when you try to learn a new or second language. And this is on page 96 in Overcoming Dyslexia. And because we have a longitudinal study, it's opened up many doors and let light in. For example, so many parents would call and say, I'm so worried about my child's reading. And these were parents of children in first, second, third grade. And the school would say, oh, it's too early. It doesn't click in until third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade. So what we were able to see in our longitudinal data is that the achievement gap between typical readers and dyslexic readers occurs first grade, and as shown here, it persists. And this was published in the Journal of Pediatrics in 2015. And so what we've learned also is what's most important is screening, so you can identify these children early. And I want to emphasize here, the screening must be evidence-based, not research-based, but evidence-based. So the goal of screening, early screening for dyslexia, is to reach children at risk for dyslexia early on, when reading intervention is maximally effective, before students fall further and further behind. Early on is when the slope for learning is greatest, and it's best to identify at risk. And here's what I mean by the slope for learning. See, children here, that's when it's greatest. Don't wait, because with time, the slope flattens and the improvement in reading is much, much slower. And as part of the Public Law 115-391 that defined dyslexia, also indicated what the qualities are for a dyslexia screening program. That is, it must be evidence-based with proven psychometrics for validity, efficient, and low cost, and readily available. And this is very, very important. And that is the failure to screen for and diagnose dyslexia comes at a very high cost. A child who is not identified does not receive evidence-based instruction, continues to struggle, and worse and sadly to see themselves as a failure and not intelligent. They have no knowledge of what their difficulty is, that it has a name, dyslexia, and there's no self-awareness of why they can't do what their peers can do. And particularly if they're called on to read aloud in class, they'll be bullied or teased in the class or when they go out to play, to the point that they'd rather misbehave and be sent to the principal's office than read aloud in class. They see themselves as not meant for school. Many drop out. There's a high prevalence of dyslexia in prisoners, in those who are addicted or try to harm themselves. When I first heard that, 50% of prisoners are dyslexic, I didn't believe it. Then I actually looked into the data and visited prisons. That's accurate. And Dr. Cassidy has written a paper published in 2021 discussing this. And you could see here, high school dropout. Dyslexics are 3 times more likely to drop out than are non-dyslexics. Now I want to talk a little more about adults. The adult clues, just like in children, can be seen in spoken language. That individual knows what he or she wants to say in their brain, but spoken language may be littered with mispronunciations because of the difficulty with accessing and retrieving the right phonemes. They struggle to retrieve words and often will say, it was on the tip of my tongue. And they avoid saying words that might be mispronounced. Their spoken vocabulary is much smaller than their listening vocabulary. Should be alerted, that individual should be alerted beforehand to be able to prepare or practice if he or she is going to be asked to speak or answer questions. So dyslexics can read, but the reading remains slow and choppy and not automatic, as you saw on the neuroimaging slides. So they read, I refer to it more manually than automatically. Reading aloud is often an embarrassing nightmare, so that individual will frequently avoid reading. Spelling remains disastrous, and that individual, not surprisingly, will have great difficulty reading handouts during meetings due to their slow reading. And I want to mention this is very important, and I talk about it in Overcoming Dyslexia on pages 419 to 429. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder has a high comorbidity with dyslexia, such that 40 to 50% of the individuals who have dyslexia or ADHD will have the other. And it's all three types of ADHD: inattentive, hyperactive, impulsive, or all three symptoms combined. And in addition, the dyslexic who's not an automatic reader, but who's a manual reader, who calls on and rapidly uses up his attention when he's trying to read, will appear to have an attention deficit. In addition, anxiety disorder. It's rare to see a dyslexic child or adult who is not anxious, because they're always worrying, when will their dyslexia become apparent and embarrassing? And here, in the center, you see decoding, connecting letters to sounds. We talk about that a lot, and that's very visible, particularly in school. But that's a weakness, but it's important to be aware, and you can find this figure on page 56, of the great sea of strengths that dyslexics have in concept formation, in reasoning, critical thinking, vocabulary, problem solving, empathy, general knowledge, and comprehension. Dyslexics have a great ability to quickly see the big picture. And that's why dyslexics are often found in very high level positions when they're adults. So now, what about dyslexia in the workplace? I'm going to talk about cognitive diversity and team building. The dyslexic in the workplace has the weakness of trouble reading unfamiliar words, reading very slowly, a great fear of reading out loud. They're all reading lacks inflection because they're really not understanding what they're reading. But at the same time, great strengths in curiosity, imagination, a large vocabulary, and excellent thinking. The sea of strengths, thinking skills, surprisingly sophisticated listening vocabulary, a high level of understanding what is read to her, and the ability to see the big picture. So if you're trying to put together a team at work, the dyslexic adds a diverse perspective. And to attract dyslexics, you must let it be known that you're seeking a diverse workplace with diverse employees. Cognitive diversity, and here dyslexics are the great exemplars. Cognitive diversity means differences in information, in knowledge, representations, and mental models, which produce better outcomes on specific tasks, such as problem solving, predicting, and innovating. Cognitive diversity differs from identity diversity, which relates more to differences in race, gender, age, and sexual orientation. The theory of diversity bonuses is, I have to credit Scott Page for, and what he has said is that significant diversity bonuses exist primarily for cognitive non-routine tasks. These included those of medical researchers, doctors, lawyers, scientists, financial analysts, management and policymakers, workers who solve technical problems, and people who manage organizations. Primarily for cognitive non-routine work, should we expect large diversity bonuses. There are always going to be unexpected failures, which often result, particularly if you are dyslexic, in the development of unparalleled resilience. And this is from Diane Swank, who's terrific. She's the chief economist and managing director at KPMG LLP and dyslexic. And she states, as a dyslexic, I succeed by engaging in ongoing collaborative work. No one succeeds alone. I depend on a diverse team whose talents complement one another. We find unique answers in our diverse decision-making. We have a team that sometimes is a little quirky, but we're very diverse and we're all very different. And to me, diversification of a portfolio is the best way to get rid of risk. Now I want to tell you a little bit about a study that we did. We wanted to see, well, what happens to Yale students who are dyslexic after graduation. So what we did was study dyslexic students' outcome 5 or more years after graduation. We studied Yale students, half of whom were dyslexic and half of whom were typical readers. And we asked and examined their academic and social experiences, both looking backward while they were in college and in the workplace 5 or more years after graduation. And what did we find? Dyslexic college graduates did not differ from typical graduates in college or in the workplace. You can find this in Overcoming Dyslexia on pages 399 to 400, and also published in 2020 in the Journal of Pediatric Neuropsychology on pages 189 to 197. So how do you attract and support dyslexic employees? You want to include and highlight that you're looking for a diverse workforce. Don't allow dyslexia, its known weakness, act as barriers. You want to provide support and access to a diagnosis. You want to screen for dyslexia and then provide a more detailed evaluation. And you want to have audio books available that explain dyslexia. For example, Overcoming Dyslexia, the second edition, I read in a studio in Los Angeles, and that's available, and the availability of accommodations. So in thinking about accommodations, and you could read about this in Overcoming Dyslexia on pages 435 to 465. So who is a dyslexic? A slow reader, a terrific thinker. So extra time has to be allocated for printed material. You want to provide important material earlier, days or even the night before, so that the dyslexic reader has time to read and assimilate, including using text to speech. Do not expect the dyslexic reader to be able to instantly read and respond to handouts distributed at the beginning of a meeting. You want to judge that individual's written material as well on content, not spelling. And text to speech and speech to text is already available in the workplace. For example, Microsoft Immersive Reader and Dictate is available for free, and Dictate speech to text is available as well. What about the long-term outcome for dyslexics? They are high-level conceptualizers. They have new insights, often referred to as out-of-the-box thinking. They specialize, and once they specialize in specific areas, they become relatively automatic. They're capable of high accomplishment. They're leaders in science, medicine, law, business, writing and literature, and poetry. A disproportionately high number of dyslexics have been honored with the Nobel Prize, Pulitzer, and Pritzker Prize. And here I want to read you this from Overcoming Dyslexia. Dyslexics think differently. They are intuitive and excel at problem solving. Seeing the big picture and simplifying, they feast on visualizing, abstract thinking, and thinking out of the box. They are poor rote reciters, but inspired visionaries. Adult dyslexics are tough. They really are. Having struggled, they are used to adversity. Hard work and perseverance now come naturally. Having experienced failure, they are fearless, undaunted by setbacks. So you might ask, who was the first civilian in space? A dyslexic, of course, Sir Richard Branson. Sir Richard often says, as quoted on page 522 in the second edition of Overcoming Dyslexia, if I hadn't been dyslexic, I would never have done it.
Wow, wow. Can we keep giving our virtual round of applause? Wow, wow. Thank you so much, Dr. Sally. In fact, I kept writing as though you were speaking to only me. I wrote so much. That presentation was power-packed, was so deep, and I'm sure there's so much more from where that came from. And we just want to especially thank you because we, of course, noticed at some points you had some challenges, and we understand that you've taken out, you made a huge sacrifice to be with us here. Once again, on behalf of the Dyslexia Nigeria, we appreciate you and we want to say thank you. So without further ado, we'll have a short video now. It's called An Expressive Art Series, which is an exhibition for children to promote dyslexia awareness and to provide a platform for children to showcase their artistic talent to everyone out there. You see, I'm now even much more, I'm even more confident now to make errors, to make mistakes, because I now understand that even if I'm dyslexic, then perhaps I just have a different learning style. So this is an eye-opener, and now we'll just play this expressive art video, and then we'll move straight up into the first panel session. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you all for being patient, and definitely would go to the next session shortly after the video.
This is the power of dyslexia. What does dyslexia mean to you? Are you a child aged 6 to 18? Then this is for you. Dyslexia to Me is an exciting, expressive art series for young people. How to participate? You can join the art expression in 3 simple steps. 1. Create a painting or drawing of what dyslexia means to you. 2. Snap a clear picture of your art expression. And 3. Share your picture using this link. Submissions will be shared on Dyslexia Nigeria's social media pages and exhibited in creative ways during Dyslexia Awareness Month in October. Hurry now! Share your ideas before the 30th of July. This is proudly brought to you by Dyslexia Nigeria.
Thank you very much. So we'll have the next video.
What I thought of when I drew the picture was a little girl and the teacher asking a question to her. And well, in her head, she was trying really hard to think, but then she kind of felt that this was chicken was the answer because she was asking something else. She wasn't really reading it nicely. She was just looking at it because she doesn't really know which one she was supposed to choose. Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
And what did that make you think about dyslexia?
People with dyslexia, they try really hard. Sometimes they get bullied. Sometimes they feel very sad because some people bully them. Yeah.
Can you think of any good things about dyslexia?
The good thing about dyslexia is that you're unique in some way. Even though you have a disability, you also have an ability to do something. Yeah.
And what would you like other children to know about dyslexia?
That if you meet someone with dyslexia, don't bully them. Try to make friends with them so they fit in.
To me, dyslexia means having difficulties in reading, writing, and comprehending. My drawing shows that dyslexia is not written on people's faces. Someone can have dyslexia, but we won't know. So I'm trying to say that dyslexics are normal people like you and I.
That was really awesome. I felt that gave me a this nostalgic feeling. Moderator for the second panel session is a wonderful lady, an accomplished one at that. She's smiling already. Her name is Miss Olaide Odediro. She is a social impact and education specialist, passionate about enabling individual freedom, opportunity, and well-being. She serves as the director at Dyslexia Nigeria, where she educates, empowers, and convenes stakeholders to create an environment where dyslexics can thrive. Specifically, she's a certified workplace needs assessor. And of course, like I said, she has a whole lot on our biography or on our autobiography, but without further ado, let's just move into the panel session. Ladies and gentlemen, let's make welcome Miss Odediro. Please, a virtual round of applause for her. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, MC. Just want to check that you can hear me, please. Can you hear me?
Absolutely, yes. You can.
Fantastic. So welcome everyone to the second Africa Dyslexia Dialogue. And thank you so much to my wonderful panelists today who will be discussing dyslexia in the workplace. I'd like to introduce them so you also understand how accomplished they all are and why I'm so excited to discuss with them today. Wana Udabang is a writer, poet, journalist, performer, and storyteller. She released 3 spoken word albums, and her work has taken her across Africa, Europe, and the US. She was also awarded in 2021 the International Writing Program Residency at the University of Iowa. and the inaugural Ama Ata Aidu Fellowship at Northwestern University in 2002. Welcome, Wana. Tomi Otudeko is the head of corporate services at Honeywell Group. She oversees corporate services functions for the group, and she's a program delivery expert with deep expertise in operational excellence. Thank you very much for joining us, Tomi. Welcome to the dialogue. Natalie Brooks is the founder of Dyslexia in Adults, whose goal is to discuss the reality of adult dyslexia and to drive awareness of the specifics of adult dyslexia. Welcome, Natalie, to our discussion today. And finally, the caregiver, Olunroti Oyesiji, is the founder of Closer Look Caregiver Foundation. Her organization advocates positive perspectives on dyslexia while helping dyslexics to win and become the best that they can be. Welcome, caregiver, Olunroti Oyesiji. So my wonderful panelists, today we're going to be talking about identifying and supporting dyslexics in the workplace. And I know Dr. Sadi did a wonderful job of introducing dyslexia in the workplace. She's laid a great foundation for us to build on. She's talked about what dyslexia is and how prevalent it is. 1 in 5 of us is dyslexic. And every organization has somebody on the dyslexic spectrum. We don't always recognize that, we don't always see it, we don't always know that it's there. And sometimes the skills that we need the most to thrive in business is right in front of us in individuals who are neurodiverse in our organizations, and we can't spot them. So today we really want to bring to the fore, how does dyslexia show up in the workplace? And what can we do to support that? So we're going to look at identification of dyslexia at work, legislation that supports that, and some career options. I'd like to start with you, Tomi. I know that individuals with dyslexia in the workplace most often know that they're having some difficulties, but then are afraid to disclose that to their employer. What is your perspective on employees disclosing their dyslexia to their employer, especially in Africa?
Thanks, Olaide. Can you hear me?
I can hear you clearly.
Okay, fantastic. I find it very interesting that you started by using the word disclosing, and gave that word gives the impression that dyslexia is something to be hidden and or to be ashamed of. I guess fundamentally, I'll speak for myself. I am dyslexic, so I've disclosed, and it wasn't something I was ashamed of or made to be, to feel like it was something to be ashamed of. I was very lucky also. I was diagnosed as dyslexic when I was 10/11. And so I only had maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 years of trauma in school with being dyslexic and being thought to be different. So by the time I was diagnosed as dyslexic, I was made to feel very special, and it was identified as something that was very, that made you feel different, but it was not, I've never seen it as a disability. I've just seen it as who I am, and it's fundamental to who I am. So it's something that in every workplace I've been in, I disclosed. I have had to disclose also because it's important in how I show up at work. It's how I engage with my colleagues, how I engage with my boss, how I engage with my subordinates. If I give an example, my spelling is still atrocious. I will not disclose my age, but my spelling is still as bad as it was probably when I was in school. And the thing that's made it that makes me lucky now is I have the computer, I have spell check and things like that, but it still shows up when I'm writing memos and writing things. So I tend to find trusted people that I can rely on to help me review my work. I let my team know that the reason I do certain things is because of the way I am. I let my boss know those kind of things. So I think disclosure is, the word disclosure, I think, is problematic. And but I do understand that in the African context, if people don't know, they can't understand. And it's still something that is, people still need to understand what it's about. So programs like this really do help to let people, general people that might not have been exposed or did not know they were exposed to dyslexic people, understand how people show up at work.
Thank you, Tomi. That's really powerful. And especially that use of the word disclose. And I use that word because I know that a lot of people feel a real fear of sharing that they are dyslexic, because organizations really focus on performance above all else many times, and they don't want to hear what they think is an excuse for not doing what you should do properly. What would you say it has been about maybe your approach or your role or your level in the organizations you've been in that have allowed people to hear the message behind your sharing that you're dyslexic?
Oh yeah, I'm not muted. Sorry about that. So I think there are a few things, and I've been lucky in the various organizations I was in. The first organization I worked in, my first job was in England, and it's one of the forms when you're filling out the forms, they ask you, do you have any disabilities? And you say, you have dyslexia. So it's just something that is known, and it is, as you said, disclosed. So, and it's something that is was a bit more prevalent. So it was very clear. By the time I started working in Nigeria, it just made it easy for, I just told everybody I was dyslexic. It was not a big secret. It was just something that I shared. I just shared. And when you now talk about the levels, I think it differs, and it depends on the relationships you also have with your managers and things like that. I've been very, very privileged with the bosses I've had. So bosses I've had either already knew or were open to that conversation. I'm also, right now, my boss is currently my brother. So he knew when I was diagnosed that I had dyslexia. And it's something that is, we joke about now. And even when I have issues and when I'm talking and when I speak now to like my subordinates, I tell them very openly that, look, I need you to help me with reviewing documents, and I find people that can do that. But I would say I've been in a very privileged position in a lot of the organizations I've been in to be able to have people that I'm able to share this with and who are able to understand or also willing to learn, because I think that's also important. It's not just the understanding, it's a willingness to learn, because most people might not be exposed to dyslexia, but if there's a willingness to kind of learn, research, and understand, it's easier for us to function together, I guess.
Thank you so much for that. Juana, I know that just like Tomi has shared, you also work with dyslexia every day. How does your dyslexia show up at work for you? And, how have you succeeded with dyslexia?
For me, I found out I was dyslexic when I was about, I think, 18, 19. It was at university, and my professor at the time, because I studied journalism, so it was during a news days, we had a news reading course, and she noticed that I was just calling a whole different word when it came to some words. And what that was basically, that was my way of masking since I was younger, and I didn't know that that's what I was doing. So I wouldn't probably know the word, and I would just call it something else. So it became automatic. So I've been performing since I was a child, essentially. And so it was then that they sent me to the Learning Development Center, and I went through all these series of tests. But I didn't come to terms with my own dyslexia, because I just thought, I was like, are they telling me I have a disease or something, So for me, I just pretended that this thing, whatever they said, didn't exist. Even if they did tell me they gave me some things exercises to do, like reading out loud and things like that. So I started getting used to the sound of words, and also the shape of words as well. So I can't spell. So things like your how, where, your how, the difference between your who and how, or even your the, so THE, I still sometimes spell it as HTE. And so I have to picture words. So words are very visual for me to know that when I spelled this thing wrong, it's not quite right. And I remember one of my first jobs, but one of my jobs in human resources, I had that, like Tomi said, you have the form that you filled. Do you have any learning difficulties? And I said, no, I didn't, because to me, I was like, I don't have anything wrong with me. And then, of course, I started making all these errors in my emails, and I had to schedule times, and I couldn't tell the time properly. And so I was misscheduling times. And so my boss called me, and I was about to get fired. That what's going on? And then I had to admit that I'm dyslexic. And then they brought out the sheet, that the sheet where I feel like, but you didn't say that here. Basically, you lied. So it was like a whole process luckily I had a friend who was working with me. So she had to start vetting my emails for me before I could send my emails out. So that's how traumatic that situation was. But now in my work now, what it's done for me is I know that I'm slow. I'm a slow reader. So I'm actually a writer, and people are like, hi, how are you a writer? And I was like, I'm a very slow writer. I'm a very slow reader. When people give me books to read, to review, I'm like, you need to give me like a month in advance, because what some people are like, I read 10 books in a month. I'm like, I can never do that, And those are things you have to kind of come to terms with, because especially if you're an ambitious person, so you want to do so much, but you have to come to terms with like some of your restrictions. So I think for me, it's just, I just live in the joy of slowness, that some things take time for me. And that's how, and so I have to be more organized with certain other things that I do. And I think that's how I sort of, deal with it. So I worked as a journalist for many years, and I had to, tell the editors, the delivery time that other people have, I can't have those same delivery times of like, oh, can you do this piece today and submit it tomorrow? It's like, that's never happening. Because after I do the interview, I have to transcribe this. I have to then write the story. I probably have to, after reading it numerous times, probably give a friend to read it again to be sure that, there are not many kinds of silly errors in there before I then submit the work. So I think a lot of it is also the individual coming to terms with their own process. So even regardless of the people that you work with, how do you come to terms with your own process so you can then articulate that to the people that you work with? Because a lot of the time you're not going to work with people that understand what you're experiencing or even know what it is. However many times, especially like if you're in Nigeria, however many times you try to explain it to them. So I think when you get a grip on your own process, it allows you then sort of dictate and fulfill your deadlines in meaningful ways. So you can, it's almost like you're negotiating how you're creating your work or how you're working with the people that you're working with, so that it's a win-win for everybody, essentially.
Thank you. I mean, I just love how different your story is from Tomi's story and how different your process is, because it really just demonstrates that two people with dyslexia are not the same.
Absolutely.
But that you succeeded and that you work with words as your work is absolutely mind-blowing. Absolutely mind-blowing. I know that you've also mentioned some strategies that that work for you. Some of them mirror what Tomi said, and some of them are a bit different. But before I go to the strategies, you mentioned that you once thought that, dyslexia was a disease. How do you feel about that now?
No, of course. I think it's, they call it a learning difficulty. I just think it's a different way of learning or different way of processing. I feel like that's the way I see it. I see it as a different way of processing. I tell people that I think dyslexia is what influenced me as a performance poet. Because one of the things I was told, after I went to the learning center and I was diagnosed, one of the things was, when you get home, always read out loud. And so I got used to, till now I still read out loud. So if you see me outside reading something, my lips are moving. And what that did was that it made words very sonic. So my writing is very audible. So a lot of people, when they read my work, they're like, oh, it's so vivid. Like I can see myself. I feel like I can, even when I'm tweeting or writing something on a comment on Instagram, my friends will say, I literally heard that in your voice, because words are they have a sound to me. So they're very, very sonic. So it became a very huge part of even my style of writing and working, where words are very visual. I need to see them. I always say words have a texture, they have a taste. I need to feel them, I need to see them. They have a sound to them. So there's a musicality to that. And I think a lot of that came from me always having to read out loud. So I get used to the sound of words. I also get used to the image of what words look like as well. So with that, then words also have a tone. So in whether it's me doing a voiceover or me performing, I can take you through different emotions and ranges, because words have color to me and they have feelings attached to them as well.
Wow. I mean, you've done so well in also bringing to life how your brain sees the words. And And you know, when people say, oh, sometimes individuals with dyslexia see things 3D, I think you just brought that to life for us. I mean, the words have color and taste and texture. I'm like, maybe not for me, but but I can
just sit with them. You'll see words come alive, literally.
Yeah, I mean, and thank you also for highlighting that you recognize your own learning style as being visual. And I think that's a great segue to talking about what some of the strategies that an individual with dyslexia can use for coping. And I'm going to turn to Natalie now, because I know Natalie does a lot of work with dyslexia in adults. Natalie, you know, what strategies would you advocate for, you know, dyslexia in adults, and what tools would you highlight?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, just the first two panelists made such interesting and like wonderful points. It was so lovely hearing them and talking. I think at one point that one had pointed out that potentially is not always discussed like at the forefront when we talk about dyslexia. When we talk about dyslexia with strategies, the first thing we often want to talk about is tech strategies. We want to talk about text to audio and different ways of navigating the challenges, and they're important and relevant and something that can really help people go further in their challenges. But in my experience, the most successful dyslexics, the ones that really transcend the challenges and lean so strongly into the strengths and values of dyslexia, is those that really accept who they are. They accept the difference and the challenges that come with that, and they don't focus so much on navigating the difficulties. They kind of come to terms and come to peace with the difficulties and navigate around them rather than trying to kind of butt up against them. And I think that's one of the things that Juana and Tumi really highlighted, is they were kind of like, you know, it is the way that it is. And sometimes I just have to accept these little challenges. And if you want me to turn something around in 24 hours, that's potentially going to have some challenges. So instead, I'm going to be honest and upfront and have a dialogue with you and say, actually, I would really appreciate the flexibility of being able to do this in 48 hours, or I would find this really valuable to be able to, you know, do it this way, or look at it this way, or maybe one of my colleagues could help me with this task. For anyone that's not familiar with me, I'm lucky enough to run a dyslexia community for adults, and through that I have a social media network of quite a large population now, and I speak to so many dyslexic people every day, and obviously dyslexic people are famous for our pattern recognition, and as a dyslexic myself, the pattern I see over and over and over again is those that learn to come to terms and accept the challenges are always the most successful, in my personal experience, with in terms of strategies and things like that. Another thing I wanted to just touch on, which we talked about earlier in the conversation, is talking about dyslexia at work. And, you know, for some people, it just comes out naturally. It is who they are, and it's a representation of themselves. And so therefore it flows out naturally. And I was exactly the same when I was working, and I was just kind of like, you know, I'm dyslexic and that's just that. You either like it or you don't. And I want to know if you don't like it early so that I can get the hell out of here, because I don't want to deal with anyone that's kind of going to treat me nastily. But one thing I've really learned is that the way you disclose your dyslexia can have a lot of power in how you're treated. And I think that's just something that's like worth pointing out in this forum, that when we go in with dyslexia, and Sally Shaw has really identified this so strongly, is that so often with dyslexia, it comes alongside confidence issues, it comes alongside with anxiety. And so therefore we go, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm dyslexic, and I, you know, I really struggle, and you know, I'm having all these difficulties, and you shrink as a human, and that's completely understandable. You know, as a fellow dyslexic, I get it. But I think when we go forwards with a little bit of acceptance and kindness to ourselves and say, hey, listen, I just want to let you know that this is me, this is the kindness and flexibility to navigate things my way, to do things in the way that works best for me. Sometimes that's a little bit different. Different is sometimes difficult to navigate, but if you just bear with me, I'm hardworking, I care about my work, and I really want to do a good job, and I think I have something unique to offer. So if we could work forward in, maybe some slight amendments, I think that would be something that could benefit us both, because I will do a good job, and also you get the opportunities to navigate my my strengths as well. So that's kind of one thing that I think can be really valuable, and just gives a little bit of color to what we were talking about in terms of acceptance and confidence.
Thank you, Natalie. That's very powerful, because what you've done is bring together something that you, Tomi, and Wana have said, which is everything still comes down to the person, and how I see myself, and how I let you treat me, or how I position myself for the work we're going to do together. And I think, it goes back, for me anyway, to the whole point of making the world want to see dyslexia as just a difference. That cannot work if, individuals with dyslexia, and those of us who work in dyslexia, start by positioning it as a difficulty and something that you should be penalized for. Then how would anyone ever really see us for who we are, as this is dyslexia, and that's okay. And thank you so very much for that.
Yeah, I think Sally pointed it out so beautifully. At the end of the day, as people, we started out life with a struggle. Our first sense of ourselves, when we were figuring out who we are, what our identity is, where we sit in the hierarchy. And at school, it's so easy to judge yourself because you are on that even playing field. It's not like an adult where there is so many different elements. Right at that first chance, we start with struggle, we start with difficulty. And so often that difficulty is not met with kindness. It's not met with understanding. It's met with frustration, irritation, lack of kindness, for many people being uncaring. And so it's completely understandable and normal that would therefore affect our identity of ourselves, that we therefore see ourselves as less than. And as someone who's been on the journey from figuring out that I'm actually not less than to seeing myself as more, I think it's completely understandable. It's just really important to navigate the path through to seeing yourself as more than your challenges. One of the reasons why I started working in this field is I used to get really frustrated with people that talked about dyslexic strengths. I used to get really hacked off by it. So I feel a little funny talking about it so passionately today, because when I was struggling, I was like, guys, I'm out here in the trenches having a bad time here. I'm like getting potentially fired left, right, and center. And I don't want you to talk about my strengths. I'm annoyed. It's just annoying. Can we please stop? And can we start talking about the challenges? But through working in the field, and like I said, having access to thousands of dyslexic people that I speak to all the time, the reality is exactly what Tomi and Wana said, is that when you feel at peace with yourself, when you feel confident in yourself, when you accept the different way that you have to navigate things, everything becomes 20 times easier, if not more. And that's, I think, the difficulty that's sometimes hard to explain when someone is right in the trenches. That's why I want to just bring that story to life, that we all understand what it feels like to struggle. And we talk about the strengths because we know it's important.
Thank you so much, Natalie. There was something you mentioned there about we all start with struggle, and it's not always met with kindness. And what some advanced societies, at least some developed societies, have done is to put laws in place that, help ensure that you do get some level of kindness for your difference. Like, for example, I know the Equality Act does, require employers to make reasonable adjustments for adults who have dyslexia in the workplace. But I know that we don't have that in Nigeria. We don't have that across, most countries in Africa. And I think for that, I'd like to turn to the caregiver, actually, to Olunoti. I know that you do some work with HR, human resources, and with diversity and inclusion. How would you say that HR and diversity and inclusion staff can justify a focus on neurodiverse recruitment and, you know, supporting dyslexics with reasonable adjustments when there is no law that makes us do that?
Thank you very much. Okay, I'll say that really we have a lot to do. And when Dr. Sally was speaking the other time, it starts with identification. I'll say that in Nigeria, we don't have that yet. When Tommy was talking, and I think the first lady, when she was talking about coming out and, you know, declaring your status, it's not that easy in Nigeria. I've tried it several times, but because I've been in this journey for a very long time, so I'll say that I've been using a lot of coping mechanisms to help. And that is what I've done with several organizations that I've worked with. What I've been able to do is to be able to identify people's strengths and actually allow them to focus on their strengths while working on their weaknesses. But I'll say that for this, we need a lot of awareness. We need a lot of workplace awareness to be able to achieve this. A lot of workplace awareness, because I don't see, well, in my current organization, I'm HR manager. For now, if somebody comes and says that, okay, we're looking for somebody to recruit, maybe for the position of a sales manager or maybe even a writer. Of course, the first reaction, if you tell me you're dyslexic, I may be able to identify with you because I am, but I can assure you if you go to another organization and you say, oh, you're dyslexic, first thing is that, oh, no. Oh, there's a problem. They will just say, oh, the usual terminology we use in HR, we'll get back to you. That's what we normally say, oh, we'll get back to you. And of course, definitely we'll never get back to them. So but what we're advocating for is an opportunity to be able to shout it aloud, to allow people to know that, well, dyslexia is not a disease. I think we should start from there, and all stakeholders, HR managers, class teachers, people should begin to change our belief system, our orientation when it comes to what dyslexia is all about. If our orientation is not changed, there's no way we can actually make any difference. So I'm going to employ each and every one of us as HR managers. I've been looking at it, okay, how do I even introduce it in my current organization? I can do it because I'm dyslexic. When people are coming in, I know where to focus their attention. I know where to encourage them to go. Let me give you an example. Now I'm running a program in Unilag, and I noticed that I've been struggling with assignments. When it comes to doing my assignments, I've not been able to cope. But what I've done so far, I speak to some of my classmates. We go over it again. I can assure you that most times I don't even submit my assignments on time, and it's really affecting me. So if that is affecting me now, how do I help? How do I help somebody that is just coming up? It's a very serious matter. So I'll say that, well, we should take the conversation out of this place. That's what I'm advocating for. Let's take it out of this place. How do we get to work environments? How do we get to our workplaces? How do we tell them that we need help? Sincerely, we actually need help. We really, really need help. And it starts by creating awareness, admitting. I wish I could, of course, now I can come out and say that, oh, I'm dyslexic and I don't have any problems. I don't have any issues with it, because I know that whatever happens, I've been able to stand on my own in a lot of ways, you understand, because what I do is focus on my strengths, and people around me have been able to appreciate that as well. But I cannot say this for every dyslexic out there at work. So in summary, I will just say that let's take it out of here. Let's call on the government. Let's go to workplaces. I think that awareness is key. I think that's where we should start from. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was a very great summary of what a system can do to a person. I think the first three panelists really spoke about the person, but you have also brought now the perspective of the system that we're in. Oh, we'll get back to you. And even I have experienced that. I mean, I advocate for workplace needs assessment. You know, people sometimes need to understand, this is my challenge, this is my job description, this is what I need to be able to excel. So you can get a workplace needs assessment. But I have also been to organizations in Nigeria and they say, oh, this sounds wonderful, but we don't have the budget for it. And actually you can just, you know, we can put your poster on the big notice board. If anyone is interested in contacting you, I'm sure they will. But they're not interested in awareness for general awareness for staff. They're not interested in workplace needs assessment. They're not interested in reasonable adjustments. So I have a question to follow on that. And my question to you is, how would you say we should make the argument to organizations about creating awareness for dyslexia to all staff? Before you answer that, I want to give a heads up to the other panelists. I know that we're running out of time, so we're going to go to Q&A. Someone has asked Tomi a specific question. So Tomi, I'll come to you to answer that soon. And it's relating to your disclosure of status at work. What made you decide to disclose and to be upfront about it at work, especially when you started working in Nigeria, considering cultural stigmatization and lack of awareness in our society? The second thing I will come to the other panelists and to everyone about really is specific strategies. I know we've talked about the person and our, you know, our own view of ourselves and how that influences other people's view of us. But someone here has also asked about, you know, specific strategies we can use in the workplace. Is it technology? What technology would you use? So maybe you'd be able to highlight one or two. So before we come to those, I'm going to come back now to the caregiver. How would you say we should make that argument? How would you make that argument?
While she's dropping off, I hope you don't mind me sneaking in. One thing that I think is really important on this topic is when we talk about the percentage of people that are dyslexic, I think there's a thought process that it's okay to just brush it under the carpet. It's easy to kind of say, oh, well, you're like one person who's having a difficulty. But when we change the narrative to 1 in 5 and we say, hey, listen, in your workplace, 25% of people are not being given the systems to be able to give you their best. And their best is something that is really exciting. So let's take the conversation away from one individual who's maybe struggling and has then spoken up about their dyslexia, and let's change the narrative to 25%. Because 25% of your organization not being as productive, not being as successful, not unlocking the things that they're really great at, any organization that doesn't take that on board doesn't really deserve to thrive. Like that's a really powerful statement. So that's just my 2 cents on it, and sorry for sneaking in.
I really love that. I think just emphasizing the number, I think anyone who would hear that would honestly feel that if they cared about a budget, the budget was going down the drain if they didn't pay attention to the 25%. I think that's absolutely powerful. Juana, is there something you'd like to add about how you think that argument could be made? I mean, from your perspective.
Are you talking about in relation to strategies? I mean, I think in terms of the workplace, I feel like there are just many interesting different things that could be done. First of all, one of the issues is that a lot of people don't even know that they're dyslexic. So that's even the bigger problem, I think. I feel like I know you were talking about, you know, Nigerian organizations and their receptiveness to diversity and inclusion. I think perhaps even like making videos that go into companies, and during orientations, they just play out these videos for new staff. So even they can recognize some of the patterns that they see, and it's like, okay, I'm like this, or I'm like that, or I have these issues with admin and this sorts of things. And then I think it's once they start to understand, then they kind of, people then know their own sort of individual strategies of thriving in the workplace. So sometimes if you're somebody who has to write lots of reports, then you might have to be tag teaming on your report writing. When you write a report, there's somebody else that has to oversee your report, and not seeing that as somebody micromanaging you, but saying, look, somebody's helping you to fill in the gaps. A lot of people who are dyslexic are great at presentations because they're very good at improvising and being on their feet as well. So when you start to even understand where in quotes you're lacking, then you understand where you're bringing in more more things into the system as well. So you're probably, sometimes you're the one leading a lot of presentations. You're also great at strategy as well, because your mind thinks very differently, because a lot of the time, for many dyslexics, even before you know, your brain is automatically breaking things down for you. It's almost like a coping mechanism. So you're used to simplifying things for yourself. So you learn in a very different way, which then means that you're actually faster at coming up with solutions and strategies within an organization. So these are strengths that people don't even realize that they have. They're very quick at seeing blind spots. They're very quick at presenting and improvising or covering by being humorous and funny. And then they're able to win all these accounts, for the business. So there's so many things like that that can happen. And then once everybody's in the know, so your bosses, and then, things that, you're not, you can tag team. If you have to send a particular email to a person, somebody looks at that email to make sure that, my guy, as we say, my guy, does this thing sound okay? You just read it out loud quickly in the office. Does it sound okay? It's like, oh no, the tone here is this, or change that word to that sort of thing. So I think one of the things is the being aware is the most important thing. And even chiming in on the conversation about legislation, one of the things I really believe is that, social and cultural change even trumps legislation in itself. We can have all this legislation, but if we don't have any social and cultural change of the people and of the organizations, then your legislation is just dormant, at the end of the day as well. So, those are sort of the things I think I could throw out there.
Thank you very much. I particularly am going to use your suggestion to go to organizations with a video.
Yeah, I think a video is great. A video that just outlines, certain instances and what it manifests like in a workplace environment. So people can actually get a visual picture of like, oh, okay, maybe when you're trying to schedule time and your 3 p.m. is 3 a.m., all the sort of weird little things, how the kind of words you use in emails, you're slower at certain things as well. So yeah.
Thank you. Tommy, would you like to answer that question that was directed at you?
Yeah, could you repeat the question, please?
The one about why you decided to disclose, given the cultural context of organization in Nigeria.
Okay, so I think the first thing is, maybe it's a personality thing, maybe it's a dyslexia thing. I don't like to carry last. And since I don't like to carry last, I need to ensure that I have the right structures in place to enable me to succeed. Given that's the case, the reason I disclose is because, one, it enables me to work effectively in whatever space I'm in. And also, it actually also helps people understand some of the strengths around dyslexia. So, it's interesting. I guess I didn't realize it was from being dyslexic. I say to people, or I've been trying to identify to people, I've been trying to identify in myself what my superpower is. And I've, in the last few weeks, months, realized that I'm just a great problem solver. That's who I am. That is like how I function. And I didn't realize, and perhaps part of it is my dyslexia, but it is just, where it comes from. So in being able to identify and say, actually, this is where it comes from, it's important for me to disclose. And in disclosing, it also helps me get help. So part of the reason I disclose is because I can tell people that I'm going to need you to help me review this. I'm going to need you to do this. It just helps me create a structure that enables me to function effectively. So the reason why I disclose is so I can succeed. So yeah, I just also wanted to latch on to the discussion around kind of legislation or otherwise. And I really like what Juana said around the fact that it's really more around the culture and changing the narrative around what dyslexia is. And I think this forum really helps because it's also helping different people here. We have over 150 people here, and 1 in 5 of us in this forum are dyslexic. And I'm sure of those 1 in 5, a majority of people didn't know they were dyslexic, and they were not able to identify the things that they were doing. And after the presentation with Dr. Shawitz, I think it's been very helpful to say, actually, perhaps I am. And I guess the next question would be, okay, so what am I going to do about it? And what you're doing, Olaide. So I now oversee HR, and one of the things I'm going to be doing is coming to you and asking for that video. And I am going to be seeing how we can actually let people know, because I'm the only dyslexic in the office, but clearly I'm not. So where are the others? I'm not. So where are these others, and how can I actually support these others to work effectively in the organization?
Thank you for giving us the leg up to start with the videos. I'm going to have the video ready for you. And I know we have all of 5 minutes left. I'm hoping to touch on the last point, which is just careers. And the way we're going to do that in the interest of time is I'm just going to ask you to give 1 or 2 sentences about how you think knowing you have dyslexia affects your career choices. So I'm going to start with the caregiver, Olonoti. What's your perspective on how, dyslexia might affect your career choices?
All right. Once you know who you are, you know what your strengths are. You won't have any issue when it comes to making up your mind the kind of career to do. Initially, I think I wanted to be a pilot. Then in those days, my dad wanted me to be a doctor. But along the line, I discovered that I'm good with people. I know that working with people is my strength, my core, when it comes to working with people, building relationships. So I decided to go for HR, human resources, because I knew that that is my basic, what's it called? Basic superpower. So I don't have to disturb myself, waste time in doing other things, or maybe trying to be a mathematician. I know that that's going to be a problem for me. I think the basic thing is identifying your strengths. Once you identify your strengths, you'll be able to determine the kind of career that is good for you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Wana, would you like to give a sentence about that?
Can you hear me? Okay. I think for me, it's just knowing that you're dyslexic, or even without even knowing. I think the most important thing, you start to understand the ways in which you learn, which then lets you understand what interests you and what doesn't interest you. And you can then, for me in my career, it's always been, I'd never had, people always see me and like, oh, you seem like you've always known what you wanted to do. I was like, I just knew that there are things I couldn't do. And they didn't interest me anyway, So it just allowed me know what I liked, what I enjoyed very, very early on, and know where I thrived. And then what that did for me then was I started to see the things I enjoy within other things. So my world also became more expansive. So as much as I'm a creative, I also work with, I work with brands, I work with companies. And I love working with even in corporate spaces, because I can see the creativity in the corporate spaces, in the things that you think are typically structural as well. So I'm always able to identify my space and myself in anywhere I go. And I think for me, that's a very strong and powerful sort of sense of purpose that's attached to that.
Right. Thank you, Wana. Natalie, would you like to go next?
Yes, the other thing I just wanted to finish on is when we talked about the cultural importance and the importance of awareness. As someone who lives in the UK that is lauded for the different laws that we have in the Equality Act, in my experience in the day-to-day of living in the UK, that is not really cared about in any substantiveness. Where we're going forward in the UK is our awareness. And I think it's about hand in hand is such an important thing. In terms of careers with dyslexia, it's funny. So I spent the last 10 years trying to outrun dyslexia. And it was all about, okay, so I can't read and write, so what should I do? Which is such a narrow guise to view dyslexia, as people who are living in its reality. If only it was just reading and writing, like it's just so much more than that. And so I thought, oh, I can talk a lot. Let me try sales. I think that would be a good idea. It turns out you have to send the odd email in sales. And the amount of names I've got wrong over the last years, I think has lost me quite a lot of business. So I think for me, it's exactly what the other panelists have said so much more eloquently than I will, is that outrunning dyslexia doesn't work. You can try and you can try and you can try, but it's going to find you. There's no hiding the way that we process information. And that's because the reality of its impact is so broad. It's verbal processing, it's the time sometimes it takes us to kind of sink information in, it's the tiredness that comes with dyslexia. So for me, again, the thing that has kind of changed my life is about the leaning into the strengths, and that has been entrepreneurship for me personally. But the other thing I think that was really important to me, and what I really encourage my community to look for, is if you can find a employer that has flexibility and kindness, then there is so much opportunity there. And flexibility and kindness is at the root to me of every successful opportunity for dyslexic people. Flexibility to do things a little bit different, and the kindness to be accepting of that difference. So flexibility means they might put in a different system for you. They may be okay with you using assistive technology. They may be all right with you maybe working slightly different hours or things like that. And kindness is not sweating the small stuff. I was an account manager for 5 years, and I think 90% of my presentations have account manager. I also worked at Amazon for business, but business is pretty much my nemesis word. So the I used to float around across the word business in different places across the presentation as and where it fancied. And I was just lucky that I had the kindness of some bosses to not care that I was an account manager, not an account manager. They knew I was more than that spelling mistake, and that for me was everything. And I say this as someone who worked with another boss who said, are you stupid or lazy, or maybe both? So I really understand the value of flexibility and kindness. And one question, I'm just going to be so cheeky and steal a little bit more time, is you asked right at the beginning, was one quick tip that you would give to people, one thing that you would change. And one thing I'm really passionate about is trying to encourage dyslexic people to take breaks. We are workhorses, and we love to just push and push and push, and we think that hard work is the answer to our problems. And sometimes it is, but it's like a break sometimes. It just like your brain is tired and it needs a rest. And the power of a quick nap is groundbreaking. So that's just my little 2 cents as well on that question.
Thank you so much, Natalie. Tommy, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to say that business is a hard word for everyone to spell.
Yeah, it's so hard. Where does the I go? I just don't know.
And how many S's?
Oh, I know, right? I know.
Tommy, I know I'm going to give you 30 seconds to just touch on that.
That's fine. 30 will be more than enough. So I think from a career point of view, what is very clear to me is that anybody and everybody can be a dyslexic person, and our career options are limitless. And if I'm just going to use myself as an example, what I've realized, and I struggled with it earlier on, was that I wasn't an accountant. I did law in school. There were so many, I have just tried and to do different things. And I realize more and more that as dyslexic people, we just need to be comfortable with continuing to learn about who we are and being open to navigate the journey of career to find our best possible area to thrive. So yeah, that's it for me, really. So yeah, thanks. And yes, I do major a lot. There's a lot of E's and R's and R's and E's, and it's okay. What I do often is, as I'm reading it in the presentation, I just laugh at myself, so we all laugh together, and that's how it works.
Love that.
Laugh at myself, so we all laugh together. Tommy, Wana, Natalie, and Olorunti, you have been amazing panelists. Thank you for your time today and for joining us. Thank you so much. Can I hand over to the MC now, please, for panel 1? Thank you.
Thank you so much. In fact, let me just be selfish here. I think I've really the one to benefit the most from the session. In fact, the interactive session was really, really mind-blowing, hearing from different people. You know, the points that stood out for me was a phrase by Wana Udobank, and she said, living in the joy of slowness. Oh my God. I wish you knew how I felt when I heard that. And then Tommy spoke about disclosure. You know, we shouldn't feel, dyslexics shouldn't feel as though they ought to be needed, but you see, they are also normal humans. And then Natalia at some point said, we need to take this, or someone said, I think we need to take this conversation out of here. So I'm feeling this conversation shouldn't just stay within us, but of course, we should create more awareness. There's a lot of things that I'd love to say, but of course, we have so much on the plate already. So without further ado, we have Dr. Akin. Dr. Akin is back, and I've already introduced them earlier, so there will be no need for a further introduction. So this is over to you, Dr. Akin. Thank you very much.
Thank you very kindly. Am I both visible and audible?
Yeah, you have. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodness gracious. Technology can be such a buzzkill. Hi, everyone. Akin, I'm Akin Odubisi, I'm a medical doctor, medical literacy professional, and thinking skills evangelist. And it's my pleasure to moderate at this second Africa Dyslexia Dialogue. So the panel, this panel is the panel about dyslexia, not the workplace, which is what the second panel was, or the first panel, chronologically. Is the dyslexia and schools. And there were a number of huge things Dr. Shally shared with us. And one of the things that was so important, and I took away with it, was that when intervention is early, then outcomes are better. When intervention is early, outcomes are better. I remember a few odd years ago when Dr. Tikolu shared that she was going to do this, and I didn't say it then, but I just thought, are you crazy? Do you know what you're trying to do? And she does have a bit of crazy, because that's the way you can do this here. Without further ado, let me introduce those who will be our panelists for today. First, in no particular order, is let me start with Mrs. Patricia Olise. Mrs. Patricia Olise is a special education needs coordinator. She's been a successful, purposeful special education needs and child development professional with over 20 years of experience working with children and coordinating special needs education in a number of organizations, including, but not limited to, and she's currently with Grange Schools, Lagos, Nigeria. Let's also introduce one of the other panelists, Mrs. Phyllis. Now, she warned me not to say the entire name. She warned me, and I just, okay, no, I'll just be a good child, an obedient child, since we are talking students. So I'd like to introduce to you, Phyllis Muni. Phyllis is the founder and director of Dyslexia Organization Kenya. She's a graduate of Daystar University with a master's in child and family development, and holds a higher national diploma in human resources management. She's a member of the International Dyslexia Association Global Partners and represents well over a decade of cognitive experience. She has a lovely book out, Narratives from Mothers of Children with Dyslexia, that I think is going to be so interesting, and we'll touch on a few of those things. So, Mrs. Phyllis Wamuchi Muni Karaoke, she warned me, I'm sorry. Just say hi to us. Can you say hi to us? Unmute yourself and say hi.
Hi everyone, and you have pronounced the three names very well.
Oh, thank you. So Jambo, thank you very much. Okay then. Also, let me introduce to you Mrs. Joy Thomas. Mrs. Joy Thomas is founder of Dyslexia Ghana and the Neurodiversity International Center, and is one of the few really technical dyslexia solutions that we have there. The Davis method. And she has an MSc in psychology and has done this for years. So she has years of experience under her belt, and she will be sharing from that wealth with us. Mrs. Joy Thomas, welcome to this panel. You could unmute yourself and say hi.
Hi, everybody. Hi.
Good to have you.
To be here. Thank you for having me.
The pleasure is all ours. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Let me also introduce Dr. Ijeoma John Adubasim. And I'm not sure if I pronounced that properly, but Dr. Ijeoma John Adubasim has a PhD in educational psychology from University of Port Harcourt, Nigeria. She's certified for supporting students with learning disabilities. She's a trained facilitator of the British Council for World Project, facilitator of GWIN, Train the Trainer Project. She has presented in several conferences and several fora, and which I found most interesting and most intriguing, she's also CEO of Brain Feed Research. For me, the name, as a thinking skills evangelist myself, I find it fascinating how she chose the name, why she did, and we're going to explore some of those things today. So without further ado, Dr. Mrs. Ijeoma John Adubasim, welcome to Second Africa Dyslexia Dialogue. You can unmute yourself and tell us hi.
Thank you. Hello, everyone.
Good.
Thank you for being here.
Welcome. Good to have you here, Ma. Thank you very kindly. All right. So without further ado, the thinking tool, my preferred thinking tool for this specific forum is the Cartesian logic thinking tool. So here's how I'd like to think about the questions. And let me start with you, Dr. Ijeoma. Dr. Ijeoma John Adubasim. Why did you get into this? What was your journey? Why dyslexia? Why was it like this? Met pilots. Why weren't you a pilot? as one of the panelists said. So.
Okay, for me, thank you very much for the question. For me, dyslexia is a condition that I'm passionate about because my first son, had difficulties. You know, watching your child struggle, he looked very smart, he could do a lot of things well. In fact, he was very smart as a child. But then I discovered that a few things didn't work out well in terms of my expectation of a growing child. One has to do with talking. He actually talked late, and walking, he actually walked late. But the doctors told me he will be fine and there's nothing to worry about. But I discovered that when he got into school, he was having difficulties. You know, reading was a big one. You know, alphabetics, but everything about, you know, reading was an issue. And I kept giving him extra lessons, paying hugely, and the school didn't understand his problem. And then they had him drop some classes, which I was willing to let him drop because I knew he didn't pick the rudiments, you know, for higher learning. So he dropped classes. And then even when he dropped classes, he was still having problems with reading. So one day I was just watching the television, and then somebody was talking about her experience, how she dropped out of school and how she didn't get any support. And then she mentioned dyslexia. And I'm like, I just picked up my pen, put it down. And then I discovered that her symptoms were similar to that of my son. You know, problems with reading. In fact, almost every sign that you talk about when it comes to this, my son showed them. And then I went back to the school. I said, I think my son has dyslexia. What do you have to say? And they said, dyslexia, is it a mental problem? I said, no, he doesn't have a mental problem. They don't know anything about it. And then they said, maybe I have to take him to hospital. I said, no, it's not a medical condition. I tried to explain to them and it wasn't working. So I became an advocate. Anywhere I go, I just said, this is the problem my son has. So when it was time for him to go to secondary school, I knew that.
So a quick one, how old was he?
Yeah, my son was.
How old was he at this time?
Yeah, when I discovered he had a problem,
yes, when you
around
discovered
5, 6. You know, earlier I just felt, yeah, everybody said he will outgrow it as a child, you know. And then when he got to 6, and then others were reading, he was hardly reading. He could just manage to talk about maybe 2-letter words, 3-letter words, and that is it. And I'm like, no, at this time, we're in primary 1, you should actually read. You should, you know, decode and encode. He wasn't really doing any of those. So when he got to, you know, with the dropping of the classes, he got up to the age of 10, and he was to write a common entrance to the secondary school. So I had to go to every examination he would go to. I would say, please, can he have an extra time? And they're like, no, every child is given the same thing. I said, this boy is dyslexic. And they said, we don't know anything about dysplasia. So we don't have any accommodation. Just let him just try and concentrate. They have a specific time to end, and he will have to end with others. But before then,
interesting.
I had searched the internet looking for help. How do I help him since the school doesn't have any plan? And I discovered that almost all the centers that could help him were outside the country, and the bills were something else, you can imagine. Then I discovered one center in Lagos where I took him to, and that was how my journey started. We did some cognitive profiling, cognitive skills assessment, and interventions and all that. And then I came back. And then,
let me interrupt you. Let me interrupt you. Yeah. Let me interrupt you briefly. Yes. So, because you're a researcher, I'm interested in what your biggest pain points are as a researcher from the perspective of dyslexia in Nigeria, in your experience.
I said I discovered that dyslexia, we have kind of 1 out of 5 in the primary schools in Port Harcourt where I stay of children who have dyslexia. And then I discovered that virtually all the teachers I interviewed in a particular area where I carried the survey didn't know anything and haven't had anything about dyslexia. And this is as far back as 2014.
Whoa.
And then I also discovered that cognitive skills are one of the skills that students who have dyslexia have deficit in. And when these skills are remediated, they have better chances at surviving
better outcomes. Beautiful. Yes. Thank you very, very kindly. Let me quickly move to Mrs. Phyllis Muni. What's your own biggest pain point as an advocate? You do a lot of work in policy.
My biggest pain point is that dyslexia is still there, and it is very, very common. And area identification, as Dr. Ijoma has said, is very, very key. So for all schools should have a teacher who is trained to identify and support children with dyslexia. And that's what Dyslexia Organization Kenya is doing, to empower teachers, to train teachers to identify children with dyslexia at early age. Because as you have heard from Dr. Ijoma, is that area identification helps people to overcome the challenges, especially the challenges that come with not being diagnosed early. Even though they may not even get any support in terms like teachers may not know how to support, but even from this themselves, and what we heard from the first team is like when people are identified early, they get to learn themselves how to handle it and how to even change the expectation from the parents' perspective, from the teacher's perspective, and even from themselves. They are able to know how to identify themselves, how to handle themselves, and how to expect, what do they expect from themselves, and also the community, how do they portray themselves.
Yes. So your centerpiece is awareness. In medicine, we will say diagnosis is the first step to treatment. So you're saying diagnosis, diagnosis, diagnosis. Is that an accurate portrayal?
Yes, and that is what is very key. Identification will lead to the right intervention.
Okay, excellent. Let's talk. Let me talk to Mrs. Patricia Olisek as well. So now you have done this in the school context. So my question for you is, what are your top 2 challenges within the school system, from school owners, school boards, whatever, and then across schools? So what are your top pain points, doing this within the context of the school?
Thank you so much, Akin.
Yes.
Thank you for this question. It is an opportunity for me to really talk about societal attitude towards identification, towards professional assessment of children. This I see as one of the top challenges we have in schools. Over the years, I've met parents who are in denial this thing of it's not my portion, it's not in our family, God forbid, and all that, is really affecting many of the children. And then I would like to state here that it is a great opportunity for a child's special needs to be diagnosed early enough for intervention. So if you find yourself in an environment like where I work now, I'm the SEND coordinator of Grange School. It's a good environment that are running an inclusive education. So we take identification assessments very serious. So if you find yourself in a situation, you'll find your child in an environment where the needs are pointed out early for you, you should see it as a privilege. I'm addressing the parents now. See it as an opportunity that we're able to point out your child's needs early enough, so that you will be able to cooperate with our plans, because without identifications, the children are really suffering. The children are made to, struggle all the years in school, because even though we have trained teachers who administer or provide support in classrooms through differentiations, through one-on-one support, and through access arrangement and all that, without identification, without a professional statement telling us the specific needs of your child, your child may not have access to all this that I've just mentioned. So it's very, very important. One of the challenges we're having, and
so let me see.
Yeah, and it's not only, I know that it's not only here, it's generalized everywhere. The challenge of the fear of being labeled, and then because of that, you wouldn't allow your child to be assessed.
Fantastic. Okay, so let's still flip a bit to Joy, Mr. Joy Thomas. Yes, I want you to talk to, is there anything specific to, what's your own primary single message? If you had a single message to say to the students, what would that message be? Mrs. Joy Thomas, you can unmute.
Yes, yeah. Well, I'm also dyslexic. I, in a way, I think I'm quite lucky because I've had the African experience and I've had the Western experience. So, yes, being assessed is very important and receiving support. But where Africa comes to play, where I'm finding is quite frustrating, it's quite sad sometimes. Yes, we need to assess these children and we need to give them the well, I'll say a label to say that they're dyslexic. Once you know you're dyslexic in Africa, then what? In the West, when you are identified and you're dyslexic, you get all the support that you need because the law says so. In Africa, when you're identified and you need the support, there's no support. Most parents cannot even afford the assessments. Some assessments are free, some are not, or screening and stuff are free. The children get assessed, you get a label to say you're dyslexic. And then what happens to the child? So we need the teachers to be trained to be supporting the children in the schools so that the children could be helped in the schools and also to identify the children. The gadgets and support that can be given to the children when they're learning, but again, expense and staff and resources can be implemented. Some parents ask one of the panelists just now that they have a stigma about the child being identified as being dyslexic. They think it's something really terrible. They even won't continue with the interventions that is put in place for the children. Halfway down the line, they take them to the prayer camps, they take them to see somebody else. They don't believe or they can't accept that their children needs those kind of help. So we are facing a whole lot of situations.
Challenges. Challenges and situations.
Challenges, yeah. And I mean, so it's not the student that needs, the student, yes, we need to advise the student, but they need the support system around them to make it happen for them. it's not that easy for the student.
Interesting.
I
Okay,
am
so
dyslexic.
let me interrupt you briefly. Let me interrupt you briefly and see if I understand what it is you've said so far. You're saying that there's a funding gap, that there is a resources gap, and having all the theory in the world doesn't matter if parents are not able to buy into it. So will it be accurate to say that if we could set up a fund, for example, something Pan-African, about $1 million, for example, that we will get more results quicker? Is that something you think?
Yes, that will help, so that the families that can't afford it can tap into it to be able to help their children. But even having said so, I mean, I've had programs.
Sorry, I apologize. Quick one, yeah?
Yeah.
Out of every 10 parents, how many can afford it in your experience?
Maybe
across
3.
socioeconomic groups and all?
Maybe 3 or
like
4.
3
or 4.
That's all. Out of every 10 people who actually are dyslexic, only 3 can really afford.
Well, I mean, if you're looking at when you're looking at the economic situations in Africa, I mean, if a child's need is that they need to pay for extra assessment, or they need to pay for extra accommodation or other things to be put in place, we need the governments to do more. We need, to come in and accept that this is 25% need. 10% of the society, or 25% situation need support, and we need to put into place.
Fantastic.
Support.
So let me still interrupt. Yes. So let me still interrupt you again, yeah, please, just because of time. So you're saying that we need to have more effective language in dealing with the government, so that proper budgeting is done for education, to factor in those who cannot pay and stuff like that for dyslexia management. Is that a fair summary?
Yes, it is. And also for parents to understand that this is not a one-day wonder, that overnight the child will be once the
it's not malaria. It's not malaria. That
not an you need to you need to go at it slowly, toe by toe, and to make a difference in a child's life. But they expect overnight. The child is dyslexic, they come to you, next day the child should be reading, and it doesn't happen. So
I understand. Okay, thank you very, very, very much. I'm most grateful. Okay, so final words. I just want to hit final words, final messages. Let's start with Ijoma, Mrs. Ijoma John Adubasim. Final messages. Final word, 30 seconds.
Dyslexia is not a crime. People who have dyslexia go through a lot of emotional, psychological troubles that they may not be willing to talk about. And so we should try as much as we can not to stigmatize them, allow them to try with others in the environments where they find themselves, whether in school or the workplace. And then government should step in. Nigerian government, I'm talking for Nigeria now, should step in. The whole lot is going on, and the government is reading these things, they are hearing these things, but they are not making the appropriate moves towards saying that these things are taken care of by the government.
So fantastic. So we need to upgrade our language and how we engage them. Empathy development strategies, so that people in government, even though they may not have children with dyslexia, feel they have a stake in the matter. Thank you very kindly. Final words, Dr. Phyllis, Mrs. Phyllis Muni. So final words. You can unmute yourself so that you can hear you.
My final word is that importantly, for intervention to take place, we all need to change our perspective, identify dyslexia, all learning difficulties, and include them in school. Put appropriate teaching methods. Children with dyslexia do not learn conventionally. So what needs to be done is that teachers and everybody, including the government, they need to have deliberate steps to help these children to be included in class. What we have seen is that although children are in the class and learning with the other children, there's a lot of neglect, and so that needs to be helped. And so what needs to be done is that teachers need to learn the appropriate teaching methods for these children, so that they, even when they say they're including, the inclusiveness is effective. What we have right now is lip service, just saying that people are being inclusive, but whereas children with invisible learning difficulties like dyslexia are really being neglected. So what I would say is that teacher training is very, very important. Teacher learning about basic screening methods. And so from there, they are able to help to apply the right teaching methods. Basically, that's what I would say. And also corporate sensitization about dyslexia. Because what you find, parents are in the corporate space, are the one there, and as has been said here, is that there's a lot of parents being not accepting, denial. But if it is taken to the corporate spaces,
fantastic. Okay, so in talking resources you have shared with us so far,
it's going to be important to help support teachers in school. Teamwork, teachers and parents is very important. Thank you.
Okay, so quick one, yeah. Would it be fair to say that we need to make we need a new kind of messaging to attract new teachers? If you had to choose between attracting new teachers who would have an interest in dyslexia management and having old teachers refine their teaching styles for further student inclusion, if you had to give them importance, what would you say? Do we need new teachers who would have it as a bit of a habit and a culture and familiarity? Or do we need to retrain old teachers so that it's, or a mix of both?
A mix of both. One, because those old teachers who are already in school need to be trained, to be retrained how to identify the children through workshops and conferences and advanced training, additional training where they go. However, the curriculum, the teacher training curriculum need to have now an aspect of identifying all learners, where you find, like in Kenya's perspective,
would really go far.
Only teachers who are doing special education have learn about identifying learners with dyslexia and other learning difficulties. But the teacher training curriculum, it should be a unit that is covered by all teachers, regardless what they are teaching, whether they're in the special need or they are regular teachers. Because those who are in college need to be.
Thank you very much. I apologize.
Yes,
I apologize, Mrs. Phyllis Muni, because we are stressed for time. Thank you very much for everything you've shared so far. And of course, it's a deeper conversation. This video is being recorded. And so please, we can also feel free to drop in further, in the YouTube comments, and Instagram, everywhere else we're going to be at. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time, for your attention, and for your willingness to be open-minded enough to share in this journey. It's a dialogue. Dialogue is a two-way street, and we're more than 100 here. So let's listen, let's enjoy one another, let's connect, and let's create a better world. My interest in dyslexia is because the children are the future, and 20% is just too much to risk a better future without. Thank you very much. Let me hand this over back to the MC of today's event. Thank you very much. And thank you everyone for listening. Have a lovely time, and bye for now.
All right, can we just give a virtual round of applause for all our panelists, and including the moderator. It's been a wonderful, remarkable, scintillating session. Like I said earlier, I keep learning. There's a saying that learning never exhausts the mind. And I don't think this conversation is something we could have even wrapped up in 2 hours. We apologize for overshooting our time, but this is a conversation, this is dialogue that of course needs to continue. And so going forward, without further ado, we're going to be having the launching of a toolkit, which will be anchored by Mrs. Olaide Odediran. Mrs. Olaide Odediran, please, the lectern or the virtual space is handed over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so very, very much. I think listening to the wonderful panelists on this second panel talking about dyslexia in school, it really reflects some of the feedback that we have also gotten in our work in schools. Many educators, many schools are passionate about supporting children with dyslexia, but sometimes they don't always have the resources, the know-how to do so. I know we advocate for training all the time, but what we have decided to develop now is a toolkit for dyslexia awareness in schools. And I'm just going to share my screen to show you what that toolkit looks like, so you have an idea of what it is. So this is our school awareness toolkit. Can you see it? MC, can you confirm for me that you can see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Thank you very much. So this is basically called Love Dyslexia. And for us, it's the toolkit that allows schools, individuals, children, and parents to love dyslexia in whatever form it shows up in school or at home. And there's a 4-step process that goes into this toolkit, which sort of feeds into what you will find in the toolkit. The first step is to enable you identify what dyslexia is. So we have quick signs dyslexia fact sheets in here. Per age, per class, there are signs of dyslexia that you can observe in preschool, in primary school, in secondary school, in higher institutions. So this is to help identify what dyslexia is. After you can identify some signs of dyslexia, we would like for you to see dyslexia for what it really is. For example, if you have identified that a child is having difficulties reading, then you can truly see that maybe it's not his intelligence that's the problem, because actually dyslexia does not affect intelligence. Or maybe actually, I'm struggling with dyslexia in secondary school or in higher institutions, and I thought that dyslexia affects only children, like this gray part shows. But then you can see on the other side that dyslexia affects children and adults. So the cards, we have about 20 cards here that bust dyslexia myths and help us really see dyslexia for what it is. After this stage, well, here's another example of authenticity. Dyslexia does not exist, but actually dyslexia is the most common learning difficulty in all schools. From that, we want to enable you to understand dyslexia and to effectively begin to support it in classrooms. So we have resources and checklists that you can use to go through the identification process. How do you go through a process to identify children who might be dyslexic? Who should take responsibility for that? What resources can you use? We have some cards that you can use, some overlays, and other resources that you might find useful in classrooms. And the very last part is to love dyslexia. Having identified it, having seen it for what it really is, and having had resources to help you understand it, how do we then love dyslexia? And this last part is about empathy. How do you discuss with the child that they are dyslexic? How do you help a dyslexic child identify their own learning pattern? How do you discuss with the parent that you've observed that their child is dyslexic? This is an example of one of the resources we have in there that speaks to this aspect. And this is a poster that goes in the schools, a general school poster on loving dyslexia. So this really is our dyslexia toolkit. We have also gone ahead to develop and put online a course on understanding dyslexia to augment your learning and to help you better utilize the toolkit. So this is a screenshot of our website where you can go to take an online training on understanding dyslexia. Please visit https://courses.dyslexianigeria.com. It's free for you to go on there, though it's not free to take the training, but you don't have to pay to access it to see what's on there and have an idea of what you will learn when you actually take the training. So certification from the completion of this course goes to your LinkedIn profile. It's part of the pathway to being a dyslexia certified support specialist. So please take this, build your knowledge as a parent, as an educator, as a friend, as a colleague, as anyone. As you've heard from everyone in our panels today, dyslexia is so common. 1 in 5 of us is dyslexic. Everyone should be able to identify and support dyslexia. That's what's going to make us really thrive as a society. Thank you very much. So this is what the outside of the box looks like. And these are some of the resources and the way they are packed on the inside. Okay, so we look forward to your purchasing this from us, you can get it on our resources site on our website, www.dyslexianigeria.com, or you can contact us so that we can give you more information about it and then you can purchase it. Thank you. So having done that, I would like to hand over to the MC. I know we're short on time. So I'd like to hand over so that we can speak with Dyslexic Thinking Africa. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Mrs. Odediran. All right, without further ado, we just move straight up to the introduction to the Dyslexic Thinking Africa, which will be introduced by Mr. Tunde Sholari. Has been on the call for since we began. So over to you, Mr. Tunde Sholari.
Thank you very much, and thank you everybody for giving me the opportunity to talk to you on this platform. I'm from the field of education, publishing, general school, and we've been at the moment within the educational world. There's a lot of discussion about really what is education, what is good education, and for me, dyslexia is not a problem with people, it's an educational problem from the start. The educational system is based on writing, and writing alone is too slim a format of expression. Because we have to remember that writing is an art form, like every other art form, but it's a very specific kind of art form. And the writing that we have at the moment is phonetically based, when if you look back into history, the writing that existed before was more pictographically based. If you look at Japanese writing, hieroglyphs, ancient Aztecs, all of these very, very high cultures that were very successful in creating a lot of beauty in the world. So there is to put it straightforward, there is a problem with the educational system because it's not working for us. It's not working for the world. A lot of children don't understand why they're learning what they're learning. Now that's because writing and the written format is not concept orientated. So we need to move more towards a concept orientated learning system. On the spectrum, we're losing a lot of really, really intelligent minds. We're losing a lot of the most intelligent children, because again, they're becoming rebellious and they're finding different ways of expressing their boredom with the school system. So the problem is more the school system from the way I see it. And especially in Africa, the school system does not include the creative topics. Creativity, as we know, is the refuge somewhat for dyslexic thinking. So, and within your average African classroom, it's only maths, English, sciences, and the creative subjects are kind of like relegated and thrown out as unimportant. Put it simply, Dyslexic Thinking Africa wants to use art as a way to get other children to find ways to express themselves and express their understanding. Whether even if they're speaking the understanding rather than writing the understanding, it gives them that life raft of confidence that's going to carry them into their future. Because if they don't have that life raft early enough, then they've been told they're stupid, they're punished, they're ostracized, and we're losing some of the best people that we have. And as a nation, we can't afford to do this. I hope you'll hear me and understand that what I'm trying to do is reach out from the educational world and sort of say, from a layman's point of view, we need more lay understanding in order to make it to approach dealing with the problem. And we need that toolkit. And that's what I'm asking for all of you to come together and help give us. And I'm trying to provide a platform through which we can then pass this information. Thank you.
Sally, we've learned a lot from you as well. One take home from what you've said so far is that, of course, there's a lot of positivity in dyslexia. And yes, I quite agree with you. There's a quote by Dr. Windar that says, when you change the way you look at things, the things that you look at, they end up changing. So thank you once again, but because of time, we just have to wrap up. All right, without further ado, we'll just move to the closing remarks of our convener, the woman who has done so much and brought us all here to, share from our wealth of experience. And she's not other than Dr. Tikolo. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. What a wonderful day it has been, and time. So much experience shared, so much information. Thank you so much, Dr. Shaywit. I mean, that your keynote address was powerful. It contained all of the information that we need to move forward, but how can I forget the panelists? Their insights, their experiences has helped us connect with what dyslexia really is. I thank everyone for making the time today. Thank you for being a part of this conversation. Mr. Cholari, I see what you're trying to do. Thank you for Dyslexic Thinking Africa. I'm sure that when we find more pathways, we will be able to help dyslexic children everywhere. So thank you for what everyone is doing in your various places. We appreciate you and we look forward to seeing you again. Thank you so much for your time and do take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Without you, we wouldn't have, had this awesome session. Like I said earlier, and I'll keep reiterating, I've learned so much myself. Like I've had to write so much in my journal, and of course, afterwards, this has sparked my curiosity. I'm going home now to go do more research to learn even about myself. And I think, I'm going to get more consultation from you. So I think the take home and what we need to do now is that we need to create more awareness, because I remember, I think it was one of the panelists that said identification will lead to the right direction. So we need to create more awareness for this and start talking about it. Let people now begin to come out and share their experiences with the dyslexia. And I think we'll begin to steer in the right direction. Let's show more passion. We've all come to share in this session. And I just don't want us to end it here. Let's go to our respective, places, workplace, and institution, and share as much as we can. I remember I like to just end this quote by John Wesley. He said, "Light yourself up with your passion, and the world will come from miles to what you burn." Let me repeat that again. Light up yourself with your passion, and the world will come up, from miles to what you burn. So it depends on how you are passionate about this topic. If you keep speaking about, creating symposiums, conferences, writing books and all that, trust me, would make the world eventually a better place. Once again, thank you so much for joining us. We plan to have this for 2 hours, but we've gone for 1 more hour. But I really must commend the panelists, even though some of them had spoken, they still stayed behind to listen. Thank you also to attendees. We still have almost 100 people listening to us. Your questions will also be answered in due time. Thank you, and thank you once again. And I think at this point, just to say goodbye.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
All right, bye everyone. Have a lovely time.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, wonderful panelists. You've been awesome. Moderators, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you, Dr. T.